I saw the clothes you had. Complain only after you earn $3,000 a month. Ever since I quit my job and became a full-time housewife, I had been constantly troubled by the unreasonable demands of my husband and mother-in-law. But I just couldn't bear this. Understood. See you in a month. In anger, I left my in-laws' house. Later, I contacted a certain place. Even now, when I remember the look on my husband's face a month later, I can't help but laugh. My name is Linda. I work as a freelance fashion designer. A few years ago, I worked as a designer for a company, but now I am independent. The fashion industry has many rivals, so working independently was harder than I thought. While I could work the way I wanted, the cases of failing increased. Sometimes I couldn't meet clients' orders, which made them angry. However, I loved my job and felt it helped me grow. I think my competitive nature has led me to where I am now. I stayed focused on my work, not getting discouraged by failures. I believe working hard has become a source of strength for me. I studied hard to become a color consultant, and I relearned how to use social media effectively. I earnestly responded to clients' needs all the time. I just kept working hard every day. Some days were tough, and I would break down crying. But because of the people who supported me, I could keep pushing forward. I gritted my teeth, faced my job positively, and continued to work hard. Today, I can make a living as a freelance fashion designer. I enjoy my life as a fashion designer. But recently, I've been feeling uneasy about something. The truth is, there'll be a milestone for you soon. Maybe you should start thinking about finding a good partner. As my mother says, I'm single and have reached my 30s. I was so engrossed in my job that I forgot, but it was generally a good time to get married. Marriage isn't everything. At first, I laughed it off as if it wasn't a concern. But when I saw my friends getting married one by one, maybe I was a bit impatient, but I married a man named Mike I met at a business deal. Mike worked in the clothing industry and was a cheerful young man. The smooth progression to our marriage was largely due to his character. Mike, about work after marriage? Oh, I'll leave the household stuff to you. When getting married, we decided that I would pause my designer work for a while. It was a division of roles in married life. So I'm now dedicated to housework. About my job as a designer. Once our married life settled, I planned to restart at the right time. In such a way, I started a new chapter in my life. I looked forward to a happy married life and spent my days with hope. However, my father-in-law passed away. I knew he had been battling cancer, but the day finally came. My mother-in-law seemed prepared for his death, but she was deeply depressed after losing her beloved partner. She's been down since Dad passed away. If she continues to be depressed and her health deteriorates, it would be terrible. Thus, we decided to live with my mother-in-law for a while. Fortunately, the land they owned was large, and they had a separate building from the main house where my mother-in-law lived. We lived in a separate building and supported my mother-in-law in the main house. Mom, you don't have to worry about us. You can rely on us anytime. Let's have lunch together now, Ariel. The preparations are done. After the passing of my father-in-law, I took on the household chores in the main house. trying to be a good conversation partner to distract my mother-in-law from her loneliness. Even though it was gradual, with our dedicated support, she started regaining her spirit. I felt it might soon be time for her to live alone without problems. I was beginning to consider resuming my career in design. However, "Linda, you haven't cleaned this room yet." Mother-in-law never tried to do household chores on her own. She would instruct me to do all the chores in the main house while she did nothing. On top of that, she'd constantly nag at me. She'd complain about the food being bland or criticize the way I did laundry. Initially, I listened to her thinking it was unreasonable, but I grew tired of being treated like a servant. I have my own things to handle. I tried explaining my design work to her, suggesting that maybe she should take on the household chores herself. But then, "All you do is sit in your room drawing. How can you say you're busy?" She didn't even try to understand my work. To her, my tasks on the computer and social media posts seemed as trivial as a child's play. I never gave up trying to explain my job to her, but she'd kept saying, "No matter how complicated you make it sound, I won't be fooled." And, "You're just finding crafty excuses to avoid chores." When she responded that way, she'd turn away, not willing to listen. Every time I tried to explain, she'd label me a wicked daughter-in-law and get upset. I had no choice but to give up explaining. How could I change this situation? I tried talking to my husband about her attitude, but he didn't listen. Judging from his behavior, things weren't going well at work. He'd constantly sigh, lost in thought during dinner and even while bathing. Naturally, I wanted to support him and listen to his worries. I believed that hearing him vent about work would help him feel better. However, Mike never elaborated on his work issues. "It's okay, I can handle my job on my own." He probably didn't want to show any weakness. Without his understanding, I had to cater to my mother-in-law's whims daily. Then, one day, Mike returned home looking more downcast than usual. When I asked what happened, he said he made a significant mistake at work and missed an opportunity for promotion. "It's okay to make mistakes. Everyone has those days. Don't overthink it," I said, trying to comfort him. But it seemed to upset my prideful husband even more. "What do you, who stays at home all day, know about it?" Clearly, my husband said this with a displeased look on his face. My mother-in-law immediately took advantage of my husband's comment and started blaming me. "Maybe Mike's work troubles are because you, Linda, aren't supporting him properly as a wife." I was taken aback by their baseless accusations. "I don't think so." I tried to defend myself, but neither of them listened. In the end, they decided I was at fault. After the conversation, both Mike and my mother-in-law became noticeably colder towards me. "Linda, start preparing dinner now." "Linda, you haven't weeded the garden or cleaned up, right?" "Linda, please buy some flowers for the table." Her demands intensified, and she took more and more of my time. Even when I met her requests, she'd find minor things to complain about. "Linda, the way you're cutting these ingredients is not good, and the taste is too strong." "Linda, about the gardening, I'm not happy with where the pots are placed. Can you fix it?" Linda, I asked you to order the sandwiches for this afternoon without mayonnaise in it. Go buy the right one. Fed up to the point where only sighs escape. I wish someone would praise me for enduring without snapping at my mother-in-law's provocations. Once again, I tried to consult with my husband to make him understand the current situation, but he defended my mother-in-law and didn't listen to my wishes. Well, my mom's getting older, so maybe she relies on you and trusts you. Plus, you're not working, so if you have time, I'd appreciate it if you helped my mom. Mike still seemed unhappy about the previous incident. I knew he had a strong sense of pride, but I didn't realize he could be this narrow-minded. With this kind of life continuing, I struggled alone in my in-laws' house, exhausted both physically and mentally. One day, an event occurred that pushed me to my limit. On that day, I had some errands to run and went out into town. After finishing the errands and returning home, I opened the closet to put away my clothes, but to my surprise, I gasped and involuntarily exclaimed, "What's going on? My clothes are gone!" Yes, somehow, almost all of my clothes had disappeared. I rushed to the main house and I confronted my mother-in-law, who was leisurely sipping her tea. "Yeah, I sold your clothes." Without even waiting for me to ask her, my mother-in-law nonchalantly admitted the truth. Without any remorse, my mother-in-law declared, "My family's finances were tight, so I sold it to a buyer." My anger that had been building up erupted. I yelled at my mother-in-law furiously. The clothes she sold weren't just any ordinary item. They were precious clothes that I had designed as a fashion designer, painstakingly turning my designs into reality. Among them were pieces I had created during the time I was studying desperately. On top of that, selling someone else's belongings without permission is akin to theft. It was an unimaginable act. I vented my frustration, including all the past dissatisfaction, at my mother-in-law. But what are you talking about? A person who doesn't work doesn't need clothes for going out, right? Despite hearing my explanation, my mother-in-law showed no remorse whatsoever. My husband, who had overheard the exchange and joined us, predictably wasn't on my side. "If you have so much to say, then earn $3,000 a month, and then you can complain." Mike doesn't reprimand his mother's actions and seems to belittle me as if I'm the one at fault. Despite feeling intense anger towards them, I desperately maintained a facade of calmness. "I understand. Then let's meet again in a month." My husband and mother-in-law couldn't hide their surprise at my unexpected response. Without caring about their reactions, I prepared to leave my in-laws' home and swiftly departed. And then for a while, I decided to live in a hotel. It's actually smaller than my in-laws' separate house, but it feels much more spacious. I savor the feeling of liberation. While lying on the bed, I absent-mindedly checked my smartphone. There were multiple missed calls and messages from my husband and mother-in-law. Of course, I ignored them all. Just seeing their names on the screen was unpleasant. Feeling fed up, I threw the phone onto the bed. However, I had something on my mind, so I quickly picked it up again. From the phone's contact list, I found a certain contact and made a call. And then 1 month later, now at the local event hall, a large-scale fashion show is taking place. This fashion show is a fantastic collaboration project between renowned fashion designers and popular models, attracting not only regular attendees but also various fashion industry professionals. I, myself, participated as a fashion designer and enjoyed a pleasant time interacting with colleagues I had worked with before. Hello, Linda. We used to work together a lot, Linda. You look well, Linda. Many industry people gathered, and I exchanged smiles and familiar greetings. I walked around the venue, engaging in enjoyable conversations with colleagues I had worked with previously. Mr. Jones, how have you been? Miss Smith, I'm grateful for your help in the past. How about you? Mr. Anderson, I'm doing well, thanks. Is little Lily about 8 years old now? Time passed in the midst of grateful conversations. The topics ranged from small talk to recent industry developments, and of course, discussion about upcoming trends that piqued my interest. Just as the pleasant atmosphere began to settle in, a man tapped my shoulder without any consideration. Oh, you're here too? Surprised, I turned around to find my husband standing there. So, how are you feeling? Have you calmed down a bit? You're quite stubborn as well. You could have just replied to the messages. It's your choice, but it's about time you give up and go back home. My husband's attitude remained just the same as before. Even though we were arguing, I was disappointed to think that these were the words he used towards his wife after not seeing her for a month. I was so stunned that I couldn't say anything, and I had been brushing off my persistently following husband. Then a man approached us. Oh, do you two know each other? Good to see you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson was my husband's boss, an executive of the apparel company where he worked. Actually, she's my wife. Despite being unemployed, she says the most outrageous thing. It's really troubling. Saying that, Mike laughed, as if mocking me. Upon hearing those words, Mr. Johnson's face reddened, and he glared at Mike. And he gave me some sincere words on my husband's behalf. I'm truly sorry, Linda. My subordinate is utterly rude. It's okay, Mr. Johnson. Don't worry about it. I responded calmly. Mike watched the exchange between Mr. Johnson and me, wearing a surprised expression. Actually, I've known Mr. Johnson for some time. I had worked with my husband's company as a freelance designer, and back then, Mr. Johnson was in charge of my projects. Then Mr. Johnson revealed a surprising fact that my husband wasn't aware of. Linda is a rising and popular fashion designer. Didn't you, her husband, know about this? What? Mike stared at me with a surprised expression. Yes, I was a well-known designer in the industry. Not to brag, but before we got married, I had quite a following on social media. Including advertising revenue, my monthly income reached tens of thousands of dollars. However, I hadn't told my husband Mike about this. I had avoided it as I didn't want to be judged based on my finances. Probably Mike just thought of me as an ordinary independent designer. And when he found out about my background, he was so shocked, he raised his voice. I had no idea about any of this. Well, I never told you. I had resumed my activities as a designer, having been freed from a small quarrel a month ago. I contributed several designs for this event. There had been offers to collaborate on this project for a while now. On the day my mother-in-law sold my clothes, I had an appointment to meet with Mr. Jackson, my former boss during my corporate designer days, for consultation. What I heard from him was that one of the designers had fallen seriously ill. They were urgently looking for a designer to handle the fashion show. I was unsure about what to do since I was on a break from my design activities at the time. Moreover, issues at my in-laws' house were a constant concern. However, the incident then occurred. After leaving my in-laws' house, I called Mr. Jackson from the hotel, gladly agreed to help, and told him I would see it through. "But you were just a full-time housewife, right?" I could feel Mike's pride crumbling. Facing him, I replied sarcastically, "Wasn't it about earning $30,000 a month that was acceptable?" After that event, I quickly divorced Mike. "Linda, it was all my fault. Give me another chance." What a disgrace of a woman to abandon the husband. Shame on you. My husband begged me, and my mother-in-law was even more aggressive than usual. But I pushed their words aside. First, earn $30,000 a month yourself, then complain. Since then, I haven't met with Mike and the rest at all. I've heard that Mike got transferred to a smaller department. He might have garnered resentment from the company's higher-ups because of this incident. According to Mr. Johnson, previous mistakes at work were also due to conflict with clients, much like this time. After repeatedly making the same mistakes and showing no remorse, he was completely abandoned. Mike and his mother still live in the same house, but it seems they are far from happy. I once passed by their house, and it felt like a gloomy air was surrounding it. I think they got what they deserved. On the other hand, I gained attention again in the recent fashion show. My work as a designer is going well, and I'm living fulfilling days. By the way, my relationship with my former boss, Mr. Jackson, is becoming quite pleasant. He's a wonderful person, one of the few who supported me when I went independent. He could be a dependable partner in life. In addition to my design talent, I might have needed to refine my choice in men. While pouring passion into my work, I look back at my past, smiling.